Imagine a Buddhist monk sitting quietly in a temple courtyard.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. But he isn't chanting. And he isn't, meditating on some ancient Pali text.
Oh, what's he doing then?
Well, he's actually staring at a laptop running a statistical regression model to prove the empirical validity of mindfulness.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty striking image.
It really is. And it's what we're looking at today. We're jumping into this fascinating space where two seemingly opposite worlds just completely collide.
Yeah, it's a massive collision of paradigms, really.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into an actual university course that literally forces ancient lived spirituality to survive the gauntlet of modern scientific peer review.
And we have the official course specification to guide us. Basically, it's the syllabus for a master's level class called Research Methodology in Buddhism.
Which sounds intense right out of the gate.
It is. This course is part of the Master of Arts program at Mahachulalongkorn Radhavidyalaya University.
Commonly known as MCU, right?
Yes, MCU. And specifically, this is within their International Buddhist Studies College over in Thailand.
And the architects behind all of this, the person who designed this course, is Assistant Professor Dr. KhantongWattanapradith.
Yeah, she has built what really looks like a masterclass in synthesis.
She really has. But I have to be honest, when I first looked at the syllabus you brought in, I was a little confused by the ultimate objective.
The Buddhist innovation part.
Yes. It says the goal of the course is to develop a Buddhist innovation. And I'm sitting there thinking, what does that actually mean? Like, are they trying to invent a new religion?
No, not at all. A Buddhist innovation in this context, it refers to taking an ancient framework, so say the concept of loving kindness or mindfulness, and applying it to solve a modern real-world societal problem.
Oh, okay. So it's very practical.
Extremely practical. They are using rigorous scientific methods to do this. They aren't trying to change Buddhism itself. They're just trying to innovate how its principles are applied, to things like organizational development or psychology or even community leadership.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But still, the blueprint of this course, it looks incredibly demanding for the students.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's a standard 3-credit course, but the breakdown of the hours is what really stopped me in my tracks.
The self-directed learning hours.
Yeah. You have 45 hours of lecture, 15 hours of tutorial, and then a staggering 120 hours of self-directed learning.
A lot.
It is. And I mean, whenever I see self-directed learning on a syllabus, I usually just assume it's academic code for, you're on your own.
Right, like, good luck, see you at the final.
Exactly. Are these master's students just handed a massive stack of ancient scrolls and told to figure it out in a quiet library somewhere?
Well, that is a common pitfall in higher ed, but Dr. Khantong has structured this very differently.
How so?
The pedagogy she uses is called active learning. The goal is to turn students into what she calls innovative co-creators.
Okay, I like that term.
Yeah, and those 120 hours,
Yeah.
they are highly operationalized. By the second week of the course, she isn't having them read ancient scrolls in a vacuum. She is actively training them to dive into advanced academic databases.
Wait, like Scopus and stuff.
Exactly. Scopus, the Thai Citation Index.
Wait, so they are pulling contemporary peer-reviewed journal articles by week 2?
Yes, they are. They're expected to navigate these global academic databases, pull relevant studies, summarize them, and Dr. Khantong provides 3 hours a week of dedicated academic advice just to support this process.
Oh, wow. So they really aren't left alone.
Not at all. And if you think about the underlying philosophy here, for you listening, self-reflection and personal inquiry are core tenets of Buddhist practice anyway.
Right. It's a very internal, solitary thing.
Exactly. So what this course does is it takes that traditional concept of solitary contemplation and bridges it with independent academic rigor.
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah. They are learning to navigate a modern research database with the exact same discipline they might apply to understanding a deep philosophical text.
I see the connection now. But I'm still kind of stuck on the logistics. Like, how do you actually blend empirical science with spirituality week by week?
Well, let's look at the syllabus progression. It gets pretty specific.
Okay, yeah. In week 3, the class dives into qualitative research. And the syllabus specifically mentions phenomenological, grounded theory, and historical approaches.
Right. Heavy stuff.
Yeah, like phenomenological is a very heavy academic word. If I'm a student trying to build a Buddhist innovation, what am I actually doing with that?
Let's break that down because it's crucial to the whole course.
Yeah.
Phenomenology is essentially the study of lived experience from the first-person perspective.
Okay.
In a standard scientific study, you usually measure external things, right? Like heart rate or blood pressure.
Yeah, there's things you can put on a chart.
Right. But in Buddhism, you are dealing with consciousness. You're dealing with internal states. So a phenomenological approach doesn't ask, did this meditation technique lower your heart rate?
It asks what it felt like.
Exactly. It asks, what did it actually feel like for you to experience that state of meditation? You are rigorously documenting the human experience itself.
Okay, so it's about capturing the nuance of the feeling rather than just a biological metric.
Precisely.
And what about grounded theory? Because, I mean, usually in science, you start with a hypothesis and then you run an experiment to try and prove it, right?
That's the traditional scientific method, yes. But grounded theory flips that totally upside down.
How so?
You don't start with a hypothesis at all.
Wait, really?
Really? You start just by collecting data. So maybe you interview 50 different people about their moral decision-making processes. You look at all that data, and then you let the theory emerge or ground itself from the patterns you see in those interviews.
Oh, wow. That feels very organic.
It is. And for Buddhist studies, this is incredibly powerful. You aren't forcing a preconceived scientific idea onto the subjects. You are letting their actual lived spiritual experiences dictate the conclusions.
Which aligns perfectly with exploring a spiritual subject.
Exactly.
But then, and this is where it gets really crazy, we hit week 4, the syllabus shifts gears completely into quantitative research methodology.
Yep. Numbers and data.
We are talking about survey research, experimental designs, and this thing called variable identification in Buddhist behavioral studies.
Yes, this is a huge pivot.
And this is where you lose me. Because how do you put a number on spirituality? You know what I mean? You can't just hand someone a survey and ask, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how enlightened are you feeling today?
No, you definitely can't do that. And that is exactly the problem the students have to figure out how to solve.
Okay, so how do they?
Well, it's one thing to philosophize about a concept like compassion. It is an entirely different challenge to map it as a measurable variable.
Right.
So in week 4, they do a variable mapping workshop. They literally have to define the mechanism of a spiritual concept so that it actually can be measured.
Okay, but how does that actually work in practice? Let's say I want to study compassion, like you mentioned. How do I map compassion?
You have to break it down into observable behaviors.
Okay, give me an example.
So you might measure how many hours a subject volunteers in their community per month. Or you might use an established psychological scale to measure their empathy response when they're shown a series of photographs.
Oh, I see.
Or you might even measure their cortisol levels, their stress hormones, right after a conflict, just to see how quickly they return to a baseline of calm.
Wow. So you have to translate the philosophy into a concrete, measurable blueprint.
Exactly. You are operationalizing the abstract.
That sounds incredibly difficult. I mean, you are essentially translating poetry into a spreadsheet.
That's a great way to put it. It is a massive intellectual leap. And if you look at the required reading for these weeks, you can kind of see how Dr. Khantong supports this leap.
What are they reading?
She uses her own textbook, Research Methodology for Peace, but she pairs it with really foundational Western methodology texts.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Like John Creswell for the qualitative approaches, and texts by Guba and Lincoln on competing paradigms. It's a very deliberate collision of Eastern philosophy and Western empirical frameworks.
And then, according to the outline, in weeks 5 and 6, she brings those two worlds together with mixed methods and triangulation strategies.
Yes, triangulation.
Which, I'm not going to lie, sounds like they are trying to locate a cell phone signal or something.
I mean, it's actually a very similar concept, weirdly enough. In research, triangulation just means using multiple different methods to see if they all point to the exact same conclusion.
Okay, so give me an example. How would a student triangulate a Buddhist research study?
Okay, let's say a student is researching the impact of a specific meditation practice on stress reduction in a busy office environment.
Okay, very practical.
Right, so they wouldn't just use one method to study this. First, they might use a quantitative survey to get numerical data on the employees' reported stress levels. That's point 1.
Got it.
Then, they might use qualitative interviews, going back to phenomenology, to ask the employees how the meditation actually felt to them. That's point 2.
Okay, feeling in numbers.
Exactly. And finally, they might just observe the office environment to see if behavioral conflicts have actually decreased. That's point 3.
Ah, I see.
Right. So if all 3 of those methods point to the same conclusion that stress went down, the research is incredibly robust. you've successfully triangulated the truth.
That makes total sense. And I noticed the syllabus notes, they also do a hands-on software workshop during this time for thematic coding.
Yeah, using citation management and coding software.
Which I think is just a great detail, because they aren't just sitting around talking about the theories of research, right? They're learning how to physically input qualitative data into a software program and extract themes.
It's very hands-on.
It is. But then, right after this, in week 7, we hit something called the ethics sandbox.
Yes, the ethics sandbox. Honestly, this is arguably the most critical week in the entire semester.
Really? Why? I mean, I understand that plagiarism is bad, and the syllabus mentions they have to learn how to run Turnitin reports. But is there really that much ethical danger in studying Buddhism?
Well,
It's not like they are testing experimental pharmaceuticals on people, right?
no, they aren't. But you have to consider the nature of what they're actually studying. Religion, spirituality, moral behavior. These are deeply personal, highly vulnerable areas of a person's life.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. When you are doing research in Buddhism, you are dealing with human subjects. The ethics sandbox ensures that these students are completely grounded in modern institutional review board standards.
Okay, so what does that mean practically for a student? What are they actually doing in this sandbox?
They are learning how to draft informed consent forms, for one. But more importantly, they are learning about subtle things like coercion.
Coercion? In what way?
Think about it like this. If a senior monk is conducting a survey among junior monks in his temple, is there an implicit pressure for the junior monks to answer a certain way just to please their superior?
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that. Yes, absolutely.
Right. That is a major ethical dilemma. The students have to learn how to navigate those power dynamics, protect anonymity, and ensure that their pursuit of this Buddhist innovation doesn't violate modern academic research ethics.
That is a massive consideration. Okay, so just to recap where we are. By the middle of the semester, these students have learned to navigate advanced databases, they can translate abstract spiritual concepts into measurable variables, they can triangulate their data, and they have full ethical clearance knowledge.
Pretty much, yeah.
How on earth do you evaluate if a student has actually mastered all of that? You can't exactly just give them a multiple choice midterm and call it a day.
No, you certainly cannot. And Dr. Khantong's evaluation plan is, well, it's ruthless in the best possible way.
Ruthless. Okay, lay it on me.
So the grading is split into 3 main categories. 20% is ethics and participation. 30% is individual reflective analysis.
Okay, standard so far.
Right, but the largest chunk, 50% of their total grade, is based on integrated knowledge and collaborative communication. And this kicks off in week 8 with a midterm format that is highly, highly unusual.
Unusual is an understatement, honestly. According to the syllabus, all 21 students in the class must present their research idea, so that covers their title, problem statement, objectives, and their preliminary conceptual framework.
Yep, all of that.
But they are only given exactly 3 minutes each.
3 minutes.
And they have to present in a randomized order. When I read that, I thought it sounded like academic speed dating meets a Silicon Valley pitch deck.
It kind of is.
Why would you give a master's student only 3 minutes to explain a complex philosophical research proposal?
Because it forces absolute ruthless clarity. Think about it for a second. If you give a graduate student 20 minutes to present, what are they going to do?
Oh, they'll fill it with academic jargon and rambling.
Exactly. They will fill it with meandering philosophical context. But if you only have 180 seconds, you simply cannot hide behind big words.
You just don't have the time.
Right. You have to know exactly what your variables are,
Yeah.
exactly how you're going to measure them, and exactly why it matters.
It just strips away all the fluff.
It does. And Dr. Khantong follows this up immediately in week 9 with a research proposal writing workshop.
Okay.
And in this workshop, the students literally have to draft chapters 1 through 3 of their proposal in 2 hours.
Wait. 2 hours. 2 hours. Writing the methodology chapters of a thesis usually takes months of agonizing over every single sentence. How is doing that in 2 hours even possible?
It's possible because of the 3-minute pitch they just survived.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if you can clearly articulate your research in 3 minutes, you have the structural skeleton you need to draft your methodology quickly. The 2-hour constraint isn't about producing a beautifully polished final draft.
It's just about getting it on paper.
It's about proving that you have a solid, workable framework.
Yeah.
If you sit there staring at a blank page for 2 hours, it means your methodology is still way too fuzzy.
That is a fascinating way to force students to just stop overthinking and execute.
It really is.
And the crazy thing is, this is just the warm-up. Because right after that, they enter what the syllabus calls the Research Proposal Defense Sandbox for weeks 10 through 14.
Yes, this is where they actually run their pilot studies.
Oh, okay, tell me about that.
So instead of doing all the research in a vacuum and just hoping it works at the very end of the year, they test their variables in a mini-study.
A pilot study.
Right. And every week, 4 to 5 students present their pilot findings. Now they get 7 minutes each, again, in randomized order, and they have to defend their frameworks against peer review from the rest of the class.
So it's a completely iterative process. They are constantly testing, presenting, taking fire from their peers, and adjusting.
Exactly.
Which all builds up to week 15, the final symposium. And this is not just a standard presentation to Dr. Khantong, right?
No, she brings in 2 external academic experts for a roundtable critique of all 21 research proposals.
That sounds terrifying.
It is essentially a mini-master's thesis defense, built directly into the coursework. They have to sit in front of outside critics, people who might not even share their specific academic background, and defend why their Buddhist innovation is empirically sound.
You know, the intensity of this schedule, the 3-minute randomized pitches, the 2-hour drafting blocks, the weekly 7-minute sandbox defenses, it is incredibly fast-paced.
It's breathless.
It is. And it almost feels contradictory to the slow, methodical pace you usually associate with studying Buddhism. I was actually wondering why the course was designed with this level of, like, hyper-compressed anxiety.
Well, that is perhaps the most interesting revelation in the entire syllabus. And it's hidden at the very end in a section called Teaching Improvement.
Oh, I must have missed that. What does it say?
The document explicitly states that they adjusted the number of presentation slots per week to fit a 2-hour in-class constraint for monastic students.
Wait, so this entire rapid-fire structure isn't just Dr. Khantong trying to emulate a high-pressure corporate boardroom.
No.
It's a logistical necessity.
Precisely. It fundamentally changes how you view the entire classroom dynamic.
It really does.
Because a significant portion of this master's cohort consists of Buddhist monks. These are students who have strict daily schedules, monastic duties, and real-time constraints outside the university walls. They simply don't have the luxury of sitting in a seminar room for 4 hours a day debating theory.
Wow, that completely reframes the whole course for me. You really have to design a pedagogy that respects their rigorous external lives while still demanding the highest possible level of academic defense.
It is a brilliant piece of instructional design. Dr. Khantong has engineered this crucible to extract the maximum amount of academic friction in the minimum amount of classroom time.
But I mean, if the in-class time is so constrained and so high pressure, where does the actual deep learning happen?
Well,
Because let's be honest, you can't synthesize profound philosophical truths when a timer is counting down from 3 minutes.
No, you can't. And that is where the final grading component comes in.
The 30%.
Yes, the 30% for individual reflective analysis. Because the sandbox is so fast, the actual synthesis has to happen outside the room.
Okay, how do they do that?
Every week, students must submit what are called after-action reviews, or AARs. These are reflective prompts that have to be submitted online by midnight on the exact same day of the class.
So they go through this high-speed gauntlet, they take all this rapid-fire feedback from their peers, and then they have to go home, sit in silence, and write a reflection on their own cognitive development.
Exactly. The ARs are the bridge. They take the intense modern academic critique they received during the day, and they process it through the lens of traditional solitary self-reflection at night.
It is a perfect feedback loop.
It really is.
Looking at the entire journey, it really is a masterclass in educational engineering. I mean, over 15 weeks, Dr. KhantongWattanapradith takes a diverse cohort of 21 students and gives them the tools to bridge 2 massive, totally different paradigms.
Yes, she does.
They learn how to use grounded theory to study lived experience. They figure out how to translate abstract spiritual concepts into actual measurable variables. They triangulate data. They navigate the ethical minefields of human subject research. And they learn how to ruthlessly defend their ideas to external critics, all while maintaining their own reflective practice.
It's incredible. And you don't even have to be a student of Buddhism to see the value in this methodology. You know?
No, absolutely not.
If you are listening to this right now and you're preparing to pitch a new project at work, or maybe you're trying to design a user experience study for a tech product, the core principles here totally apply.
100%.
If you combine deep self-directed research with the crucible of rapid-fire peer review, you end up creating a framework that is both deeply thoughtful and sharply resilient under pressure.
It just proves that you don't have to choose between respecting ancient wisdom and demanding modern empirical rigor. You can actually use the tools of one to validate and elevate the other.
Beautifully said.
But, it does leave me with a lingering thought, something I really want to pass on to you, our listener, to sort of mull over on your own.
Oh, what's the thought?
Well, if a course like this is successful and you have students using quantitative variables, statistical software, and empirical methodologies to explore these ancient truths, what happens when the data surprises us?
Ooh, that is the ultimate tension of bringing science to spirituality, isn't it?
Right. Like, what happens when a rigidly structured quantitative survey reveals something that fundamentally challenges a traditional interpretation of a 2,000-year-old Buddhist text?
That's a scary thought for some people.
Exactly. Does applying a modern empirical methodology somehow alter the ancient message by forcing it into a spreadsheet? Or does it simply clarify it, cutting through centuries of cultural noise so the core truth can be understood in a brand new era?
Are we fundamentally changing the map, or are we just finally seeing the terrain clearly?
Exactly. Are we changing the map or just seeing the terrain clearly for the first time? It's a profound question to chew on as we navigate our own modern challenges. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Buddhist research methodology. Keep asking the hard questions, and we will catch you next time.